Hey Patriots, hope you're all doing well. Man, I can't believe we have another Borderlands game. Even though 3 just came out about 6 years ago, time still just went by so fast and it still doesn't even feel that long ago. But yet, here we are in 2025 playing a new Borderlands game. And there is a lot I have to say. Some good, some bad, and some heavy critiques that I hope are changed either in later updates or any upcoming Borderlands game. Just to keep things organized, I'm going to categorize my topics, and my biggest chunks will most likely be story and gameplay. Also note too that there will be spoilers. I'm sure most of you have already finished the game story by now, but for those of you who held off and didn't buy the game, there will be spoilers, and for me to say everything I need to say, I cannot avoid talking about spoilers. I'm going to try and touch every talking point I can think of, so don't be surprised if this video is pretty long. Borderlands is up there with some of my most favorite video game franchises, so I have so much to say that I want to say and what needs to be said. By the way, I have held off on watching any review video or looked at reviews of Borderlands 4 so that way I can talk about as much with my own opinions and not have any sort of influence from other voices. So everything in this video is 100% my own opinion. So if I have a similar take to someone else, then I guess they're just as smart as me. So let's talk about if Borderlands 4 is any good. Before I get into everything else, I need to talk about the game's optimization because of every other issue this game suffers, the optimization is the biggest one that has probably held off a lot of you back in either enjoying the game or even thinking about buying it. Something to know though about my performance compared to maybe some of you guys, while I do have a 4070 Ti in my PC, I installed this thing before I really knew anything about PC parts, and as of right now my PC has a massive part mismatch. I'm running on 32 gigabytes of DDR4, a 5-year-old i9-9900K processor, a motherboard that only supports Gen 3 PCIe slots. So as you can see, my dumbass kinda hindered my PC performance, so I'm not exactly sure what my performance could be on a better, compatible build. However though, for the most part, my 4070 Ti does do a lot of the heavy lifting in most of the games I play and gets pretty decent performance despite my build mismatch. With that being said though, my performance is still not that great. I have to run this game at medium to low settings with only textures being set to high with DLSS set to balance, and I cannot get above 60 frames in the open world. And if I turn DLSS off at even low settings, this game is unplayable. I have tried so many different settings, switching resolutions, and nothing has been able to get me above 60 FPS, and even for my build mismatch is quite unacceptable. My friend who has a 3090 in an actually matched build can't run this game in 1440p on low settings and get above 30 FPS. And he sometimes gets better performance than I do in some games. And even my friend who has a 5090 can't run this game in 4K high settings and can barely get a steady 50 FPS. There is no excuse as to why this game should run this bad when it looks almost no different than Borderlands 3, and other games can run better than this. And what makes it worse is that you have retard Randy going on Twitter and telling people to just upgrade their PCs. No buddy, your game has shit optimization and you need to make it better. You lied on your minimum spec requirements, so don't tell people they need to upgrade their PCs. Now of course there has been a bunch of people going around going like, "Raw, Unreal Engine sucks," and that's a whole different topic, but no, it's not UE5. There's a lot of good-looking, well-optimized UE5 games. Borderlands 4 is just not one of those because the devs are either incompetent, complacent, or just didn't involve optimization for some reason during the development process. But yeah, optimization is bad. If you have older hardware and can't upgrade or don't want to upgrade, then I highly recommend you do not get Borderlands 4. You will turn your PC into a nuclear reactor. So either hold off until it hopefully gets more optimized in the future, or just skip it entirely. In order for me to really dig deep into the story, I'm going to have to go into the order of factions I did the quests for the main story. Now obviously after you get past the prologue, the first faction you interact with are the Outbounders. So for obvious reasons, we will be starting there, but then after that I choose to go for the Electi, the Augurs, and the Order as the final one since they are the antagonizing faction. So first, Outbounders, Electi, Augurs, then Order. Another thing I'm going to try and avoid as well as recapping the story, rather I'm going to talk about pieces of the story and how they play out, and how I feel about the overall story. I have a lot to say about the game's story. I don't know how many people are going to agree, but I honestly don't care if you agree or not. It's fine if you do, but I'm not going to be offended if you don't. So as usual, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. Alright, let's carry on. Now, in order for me to build this out, I have to explain the concept and how the game's story plays out. For all of you that have already played the game, you know this already, but because of how my brain works, I need to lay it out even if you know it already. But the game has a big open world that is broken up into 4 sections of the map. To the south, you have the land of the Outbounders, the Fade Fields. Then, to the northwest, you have Carcadia Burns, which is the land of the Rippers and the Electi. Then northeast, you have Terminus Range. This place holds Vile Lictor's Keep and where the Augurs live under Lictor's communism. And then the fourth and final area is Dominion, which I'm not a fan of, but we'll get there eventually. To start things off, let's begin with the prologue. The game begins just like every other Borderlands game by Marcus giving us the gist of what things are to come, then afterwards get greeted by another intro animation, which again looks really good. But the game begins with us captured by the Order. They show us around their fine establishment and force us onto the goon chair where they force a piece of their technology into our spine called a bolt. And this becomes very important later on in the game because this is how the Timekeeper, the villain of the game, allows himself to take control of us when he wants to and is essentially a tracker for him. There are some critiques I have of this, but I will talk about that later on. After being gooned up on the goon chair, we are saved by another Vault Hunter by the name of RJ. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this character is brand new only in this game. But what sucks the most about RJ is that he doesn't survive very long. He only lives till the end of the prologue and the Timekeeper kills him off. I wish he would have gotten more character development, and I'll explain why further into the video. But after killing the Warden, we get sent to Sleepy Time and wake up in the Fade Fields where the real game begins. By the way, the Fade Fields has got to be one of my most favorite areas in the game. It looks so damn good. But after waking up, falling on our faces from completing the prologue, we're recruited by a Claptrap, who's even more annoying in this game than even the last one. Then we're just involuntarily recruited into the Crimson Resistance, or whatever generic Crimson name they came up with this time. And not too shortly after, we meet the Outbounders. Now, the Outbounders themselves, I don't really have much to say because, to be quite frank, they are the most boring and generic good guy faction. Rush, their leader, is generic good guy leader who has no polarizing traits, doesn't have any gray area point of views, just a good guy who's a good guy. It's cool that he is one of the biggest bros in the game, but sometimes it takes a little bit more than that to win me over. And I mean, just overall, I think this faction doesn't really get that much development. There are side quests that are kind of like main missions for that faction that aren't directly tied to the main story quest, and I'll talk about those later. But earlier I was mentioning that there are 4 broken up areas that sort of each have their own story tied to the main story missions. Well, something I forgot to add in there is that each of these areas have their own world boss, if you kind of get what I'm saying. If you played Far Cry 5, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. But the Fade Field's main villain is Idolator Sol. The other main villains for their designated zones I'll talk about when we get to their respective zones. But Sol is one of the weaker world bosses in my opinion. Well, why do I say that? Well, that's because all he does is yap through a hologram the whole entire time. I'm not trying to shit on the voice actor for Sol because ultimately it's not his fault for the character's development for the game, but I do find it kind of funny that the same guy who voices Sol also did Escharum, and all these 2 villains ever did was yap through a hologram. It really makes me wonder how much homework Gearbox is really copying for their own game. And for me, it really doesn't make the villain feel engaging whatsoever. Now, you might be yelling at me and saying that that's all Jack ever did was talk to you through the Echo, and my response to that is Bloodwing, Roland, and Lilith. But overall, I found the Outbounders kind of boring. Rush to me just pretty much felt like such a good guy that kind of made it hard for me to like him because it didn't ever really feel like there was much character depth for him. And I don't know how many of you might feel the same, but I really feel that way about a lot of the game's story. There was one moment in the Outbounders story where I was starting to get intrigued, and that was when that one ship escapes that you were trying to stop and attacks the Outbounders village area, and when that happened, I was like, holy shit, are we about to get some stakes here? And then I was kind of disappointed when I had all the time in the world to do that part of the quest and nothing really happened after that attack. Just some no-named NPCs died, and I just didn't really care. That was one of those moments where I wish they would have added like maybe a timer you had to beat in order to save the village to get you invested in actually wanting to save that town and the characters. I know that Borderlands isn't really like a story choice-driven game, but I think I would have liked to see something like that. It does happen one time later on in the story, and I will be talking about that when I get to it. But in the Outbounders story side of things, nothing really happens. The only longtime character that shows up is Claptrap, but other than that, the first section of the game really isn't interesting. The Fate Fields itself looks really good, and I liked exploring it, but that's about it. However, this is where the story really picked up for me. After killing Idolator Saul, you have two more boss factions to choose from, Violector or Callus the Ripper Queen. And as I said for my playthrough, I went on to the Ripper side of the map after killing Saul. The Electi are honestly my favorite faction in this whole game. Your first encounter with the Electi starts with meeting Quent, and Quent is having issues dealing with the Rippers. Matter of fact, the whole Electi society is having issues dealing with the Rippers. But when you first meet them, their whole society is on the brink of collapse, and of course, we're the ones there to help them out. And to restore the Electi back to full strength, we need to kill Callus and get her bolt. To talk a bit more about the Electi, I have to explain why these guys are my most liked faction in this whole game out of the rest of them. What makes these guys so interesting to me is how they are the polar opposite to typical Borderlands living situations. Pretty much every other Borderlands faction, except for the super techie ones, have embraced the rusty outback aesthetic that these games have delivered. These guys live in a rusty, dusty environment with everything around every corner trying to kill them, and all they want to do is live in their posh, elitist society. At first, upon meeting Quent, he and his group of people originally annoyed me, but after getting to know them a bit more, I began to understand that this is how these guys are just designed. And their polar opposite living style compared to most other Borderlands factions is what made me really appreciate how unique these guys actually are. And when you encounter Levane, she's the reason they become your favorite faction if you get what I'm putting down. But also, they bring back Zane during this part of the game. Zane was one of my most favorite Vault Hunters in Borderlands 3. Not only because was he super busted, but out of all the other characters, he had the most personality to me. So I'm really glad they incorporated him into the story, and his character really fits being a part of the society. He is also one out of the two playable Vault Hunters from Borderlands 3 that make an appearance as NPCs for this game. This part of the game too also reintroduces us a fan favorite character, Moxie. And I gotta say, Gearbox has so far kept her lore accurate, which kinda surprises me. But besides meeting Zane, the usual stuff happens. Kill Callus, get her bolt, and we are one step closer to finally fighting the Timekeeper. And this is the final faction we will be helping before we make our final push into Order's headquarters. Now, the Augurs to me are kind of in the same place as the Outbounders when it comes to these three factions I like the most or least. The Augurs, I kind of like this mix of Nepali society that incorporates futuristic technology with their biology. So pretty much like Cyberpunk. You would think that this would be a pretty interesting premise for a faction, but really it's nothing more than just visuals. Despite them being a sci-fi faction, they're really nothing more than just your generic, peace-loving, nature-worshipping hippies, and I find them kinda boring. The only new character I really liked from this faction was Defiant Caldair. This section of the game is also where we meet another Vault Hunter from the previous game, Amara. And I gotta say, I think they did a pretty good job at fleshing out her character in this game. I still like Zane more, but I do think Amara got some pretty decent character development. I would not hate to see her a bit more in any possible DLCs or future games, as long as they don't assassinate her character. But while the Augurs might have been kind of boring, the villain here I think is one of the most interesting ones out of all of them in the whole game. Saul is just an annoying yapper, Callus is just kind of there, but Violector though is way more interesting. He's still kind of cartoonishly villainy, but in terms of development of a villain, he's pretty damn decent. Also, you remember those side quests I mentioned earlier? Well, the story pairing side quests for this section of the game helps flesh out Lictor even more, and I highly recommend you guys play them if you haven't. And in any case you aren't exactly sure what side quest it is, look for this icon in the middle of the exclamation mark. But as for Violector, he gets the most attention when it comes to fleshing him out as a villain compared to the other ones. And sure, they all have their own evil layers. Lictor's though I feel like gets the most attention. He has two different places he owns and operates. He has his Black Site research station up in the mountains, and he has his main keep. His Black Site research station shows us that he has been up to some experiments. A couple of these experiments have been the vile variant of enemies roaming around the map. They range to Rippers, Order, and pretty much any animal. The second one is his biggest one, the Phase Realm. The phase realm is basically an alternate dimension where sirens get their phase powers from. The game doesn't really explain it much, but granted they introduced it pretty late into the game, so I would imagine the next game will explore that a bit more. But yeah, overall this part of the game wasn't too bad. I liked Lichter a lot more than all the other villains honestly, and I really liked Amara being brought back in. I think she has some pretty decent character development, and Defiant Calder was my most liked side character during this whole part of the game. Now we are near the finish line in both terms of the story and where this chapter of the video ends. I'm sure you guys noticed that I left out a certain character out of a lot of the portions I covered, and that character is Zadra. And the reason for that is because, well, she was ex-Order, so I decided to put her in here along with the Timekeeper and Order as a whole. And in the next chapter I talk about, she will be used as one of my talking points. But anyway, the Order. The Order are obviously the main enemy faction in the game. They hold control over Kairos, and the Timekeeper is the ruler of this kingdom. And Dominion is that realization, a dystopian, urban jungle where roads and sidewalks almost blend with one another. One thing I kind of noticed about when you're walking around Dominion, they tried to give you this comedic dystopian feel to the place similar to what Opportunity was, but man, it just does not hit the same. I will be talking about the game's humor and all that stuff later, but here in Dominion, it just does not hit the same as Opportunity. I think it's because the main villain has absolutely no humorous side of him. Meanwhile, the city has this comedy dystopia style to it, and it just does not work. But honestly, I don't really have much to say about Dominion other than that. Instead, I want to talk more about the Timekeeper and Zadra and how flat I honestly think these characters are. First, let's start with Zadra. Zadra is introduced to us somewhat early on into the game during our time helping out the Outbounders. All we know is that she used to be an Order scientist and that had defected from them. Well, later on into the game, we learned that she was the one who created these bolts that the Timekeeper has put into everyone, and that she and the Timekeeper almost had a lover relationship with one another. And the thing is, this isn't bad lore. Honestly, I think it's pretty well written. It's just that Zadra as a character doesn't really feel like she has any life to her. I get that maybe that could perhaps be her character, but still though, all she really does the whole game is just spout exposition the whole time. It doesn't really have any major character developments or personality dynamics. And when the Timekeeper possesses us and kills her off near the end of the game, I honestly did not care much. I think that with this scene, they were trying to recreate that same impact and shock that Roland's death had when Jack killed him, but man, Roland's death was earned. And like, it's not like I'm happy about them killing off Zadra. They didn't really give her a chance to grow as a beloved character like Moxie or Lilith. I don't know how many of you felt this, but personally I think a lot of the story was rushed. I think that's why the game was split up into 3 separate story arcs that were kind of short. It took me about 50 hours-ish to finish the main story, but that's combined with doing side quests, farming, and all the other side stuff they have around the game. Without doing any of the side stuff, and without all the long distance traveling in the open world, I'd say the main story is no more than 20-ish hours. And don't get me wrong, that's perfectly fine for a game story, especially for an open world one. It does feel like they didn't really have the time to really flesh out these characters really well, which really sucks because in terms of the writing, I do think they did a lot better this time around, but at the same time, everything just feels kind of like it comes and goes, and it just didn't really sit with me the whole time. But for the last character to mention in this whole chapter, we finally get to the Timekeeper. I'm gonna be real, the Timekeeper has got to be one of the most boring villains I've ever seen in a Borderlands game besides Commandant Steele from Borderlands 1. He has no personality. I don't even remember anything he says because he just speaks in this low, bad, evil guy voice, and everything he says just blends together and doesn't really stand out. I mean, he's powerful, but legit his whole strategy throughout the whole game is just, it was a part of my plan to let you win. It's the most lazy way to design a villain's reaction to defeat. Look, I know that Jack is an unreachable bar that no Borderlands villain will ever attain ever again, but whenever Jack had a big blow done to him, you could tell that he did not like that very much. And when he did major blows to you, he made sure to rub it into your face. And hell, even with how much I don't like the Calypso twins, I can't believe I'm complimenting them, but the same thing happens to them. You deal a big blow to them, they get very upset and they let you know about it. And when they deal a big blow to you, they rub it in your face. But none of that ever really happens with the Timekeeper. It's either, it's all a part of my plan, or you're not going to beat me, so give up. It's all so monotone and lame. One inconsistency I want to talk about real quick are his bolts that he uses to control the population of Kairos. Is that if he can physically control the population with these bolts, then why the hell does he just not take control of us and kill us off? There are so many instances where he takes control of us in the game. If he just wanted to end our uprising, why not just take control of us and off ourselves? He tried after when he forced us to kill Zadra, but by sheer will, I guess, we just say nope and stop it. And this is never explained. And look, I think the bolts are an interesting concept. It legit feels like something that would come out of 1984 and sounds like something an evil dictator would use to try and control the population. Again, while I think the writing overall in Borderlands 4 has improved since 3, I don't think though they had either the time to build it out better or just didn't really know how to structure it better. Overall, I will say though that this is heading in a better direction than what 3 went, and I will never hate on improvements. This section of the video is where anything that isn't story is all tossed in, so things like gameplay, music, the playable characters, and so on. So to start things off, let's talk about the gameplay. Gameplay has always been something that every Borderlands game has done pretty well. Hell, it's the reason why we keep coming back to them no matter how old and slightly dated the more older ones are. And to no surprise, but Borderlands 4 has had some pretty decent gameplay improvements. And one of the best quality of life improvements they added was a simple mark as junk and sell as junk button. This just makes it so much more simple to grab what we want and what we don't want and don't have to sort through everything and double check that what I'm going to sell isn't something I don't want to sell. Another thing they added was a simple extra movement mechanic that I think really helps improve the movement skill aspect of the game is the boost pack that we get that allows us to either float or dodge in a direction. One of my biggest annoyances in older Borderlands games is where your movement does not matter and your enemies just aim by you or their projectiles track you. It's so dumb, and I'm glad they finally got rid of those and now we have more options to avoid damage. It really does add a skill gap when it comes to fighting bosses and even just enemies in general. And the nice thing about it too is that it's not super complex. No slide canceling, no fucking hopscotch into bunny hopping or whatever the shit they add in movement shooters nowadays. None of that. Just simple float or dodge in either 4 directions. If you aren't using the movement mechanics enough and are dying a lot, I recommend you try using a bit more and build up that skill set. It'll make your life easier. Borderlands games in the past have usually had at least one meta build or gun that is generally the go-to. Any of you who are familiar with Gunzerker and Unkempt Herald know this all too well. But I have to give Gearbox credit. I think out of all the Borderlands games I've played, this one is the most balanced one I've played. I first started with Amon, but later on switched to Vex through the rest of the game. At least for me, I never felt like my skill tree set and weapons to pair my build ever felt like I could not play the game. I love Borderlands 1 and 2, but if you do not play raw sniper damage build for Mordecai, or left a middle skill tree and Unkempt Herald for Gunzerker, you cannot play the game. Now granted, there isn't an endgame out yet for Borderlands 4, and there's no raid bosses yet, but overall the weapons I use and the build I use never made me feel like I could not play the game. Now of course there are objectively better skills to invest in and better weapons to use with that build, but you're never actually out of cucked playing the game if you aren't using meta builds. Another thing I gotta give Gearbox credit for is making the different elemental types make quite a difference in gunfights. I don't know how many of you felt this way, but I feel like in Borderlands 2 and 3 that the different elementals didn't really matter. In Borderlands 2, I pretty much entirely skipped out on other elemental types and just focused on kinetic and slag, while in Borderlands 3, I mainly focused on kinetic or radiation since those were pretty much the only neutral elemental types. But in 4, I have almost every element assigned to my weapon slot since using those matching elements can really make the difference. I really like this because it encourages you to use the different elemental types. I'm glad there's no slag or similar. I think forcing people to use an elemental type that drastically reduces an enemy's damage resistance is just lame and heavily limits build variety. However though, I guess one negative I have to say about the weapons, more specifically the legendaries, is that very few of the legendary weapons look unique among the other weapons. On top of that, their names don't really stand out much. Like, I can name you almost every legendary piece of gear in Borderlands 2 and almost tell you exactly what legendary is what just by looking at it. I'll even throw you a little test. Here's 5 legendary Borderlands 2 legendaries, and here's 5 Borderlands 4 legendaries. Let me know how many you got. If you put a gun to my head and told me to name at least one legendary off of memory, I just squeeze the trigger for you because ain't no way in hell I'm going to be able to tell you. But to get back on, another great thing Gearbox did was how the weapon license part system works. Essentially, all weapons have a bare minimum of at least one licensed part from other manufacturers. So for example, you may have a Vladof gun, but you can have a Hyperion part that alters how the weapon works. And if I remember correctly, every weapon has a maximum capacity of 3 different manufacturer parts. And I really like this because it allows for so many different variations of builds that you can experiment with and see which parts work best for your build. And the more options, the better. This one will be pretty quick, but I want to mention the enemy NPCs real quick. I don't know how many of you felt the same way I did when fighting the human enemies in this game, but to me they feel pretty lifeless. From Borderlands 1, 2, and even 3, despite how fucking annoying it was to hear all the psychos yell, "There's the Vault Thief," the enemies felt like they had life to them. The bandits in Borderlands 1 would talk shit to you as they tried to kill you, and the Crimson Land soldiers would communicate with each other when you engage them. And in 2, the psychos just always say some funny shit to you, like how they're going to turn you into a meat bicycle or something, and as mentioned, the COV would shout, "There's the Vault Thief," and other dumb shit. But in 4, I noticed that the enemies just feel flat and lifeless. They don't ever really talk shit to you, they don't say any funny shit, just nothing. And no enemy type ever really stands out to me either than the vile ones, and that's only because they're so fucking annoying to kill. I don't know if it's just because I'm so apathetic to shooting sci-fi types enemies that I just don't care, or if Borderlands really has just hit the ceiling in what types of enemies they put into the game. One enemy type I was really hoping they would bring back was the Seraphs, but unfortunately they did not. I wish they did. I feel a bit mixed when it comes to how progression works in this. First off though, I do want to say that I do like the loot drop chances in this game. One of my bigger peeves of Borderlands 3 was how unrewarding legendaries felt in that game. Because not only were the weapons themselves a bit underwhelming in 3, but also unrewarding to get one. Meanwhile, in 2, you all know that rush of excitement when that legendary finally drops that you've been farming for, and it's the stats you've been wanting. And I gotta say, 4 brings that feeling back. With the lower drop chances along with the weapon license system made me so excited to get the legendary I wanted to drop, and it also have the stats I wanted. Though I am a bit sad pearls haven't made their way back into the game, at least yet, but in terms of the overall progression I do have a few nitpicks, but I do mainly have compliments. I personally think it takes too long to get to level 50. I'm sure some people might disagree, but I don't think it should take me 80 hours to get to level 50. Now I'm sure some of you might be telling me, well, just do a lot of side quests. But the thing is, side quests are actually a smaller portion of where your time consumption will come from. Most of my time was spent between doing main missions, obviously, farming for gear, and doing open world side activities. And I get why they made it take you so much longer to get to max level in this game compared to older ones to really let you absorb of what the game has to offer. But man, I would be lying if I didn't say I was fatigued by the time I hit level 50. Another thing I also feel a bit mixed about is how the SDU system works. In previous Borderlands games, you use currency to upgrade your SDU, but in this one you do open world activities to get your upgrade points for your SDU. And the reason why I'm conflicted on this is because doing the open world side activities becomes a chore because I have to do them to upgrade my backpack and ammo rather than just upgrading at my own pace. But also, since the open world activities rewards you with upgrade points, it also justifies doing them rather than just money and XP being the rewards. But then again, the open world activities follow the Ubisoft approach where it's all checklist and side activities are all the same, and instead of exploring the open world, you're just cleaning up your markers. Which leads me to talk about the open world. And again, with the open world, I feel a bit mixed about it. If you've seen my Borderlands videos, then you know how much I glaze Gearbox for their environmental art design. And something Borderlands environments have always done for me is wanting that knowledge of what's beyond the borders. What does this world look like beyond here? Well, you would think an open world Borderlands would satisfy that. Well, Not entirely, at least not for me. And I think the reason for that is that there's so much to see but not really so much to know. And what I mean by that is nothing feels organic to explore because there's always a marker hinting you to go somewhere. And even though there's so many homes, buildings, and towns, none of them are populated except for the main areas. A house you encounter somewhere not in the main hub area is nothing more than just a static mesh. The thrill of exploring just doesn't exist because instead of trying to learn more of what's in the world, you're going somewhere that the game is telling you to go. There's no mystery, no organic discovery, just ticking off map markers. I honestly don't think an open world improved the flow of Borderlands gameplay. I really hate traversing the open world. It's just way too big for how empty it is. The open world visually just doesn't feel coherent when traversing it. I had to open my map so many times to move around the open world because of how visually incoherent it is. It's weird because I wanted more to explore, yet they gave us a bigger world, but there's not really much to explore. I really hope that the next Borderlands game isn't open world. Borderlands 3 was that perfect blend of having more to look at while also not giving you too much where it all just feels like junk volume. I hope they do something in either the next game or in future DLCs where they combine that type of level design and incorporate some of the open world stuff they had in this one. Like, it would be cool if you finished a part in the game that opened up a new area and like you had the bounties and quests to go back to the locations you've been to, or open new locations to the places you've already been and slowly open up more and more of the world around you. Something kind of similar to a Metroidvania. I don't know if I'm just in that unpopular world where I just don't like the Ubisoft style open world game, but I really am just sick of this style of open world. It's lazy, it's unrewarding to explore, and it makes exploring feel more like a chore when I want exploring to feel like an experience. Earlier I mentioned a quality of life feature where you can just press a single key and it marks that item as junk, and you can also just press one key to sell all your junk. That was a pretty good quality of life feature, but ultimately in this section I'm pretty much combining QOL with UI since in a lot of ways they go hand in hand with one another. And to be honest, they did a lot of changes to the UI that they should have just left alone. Firstly, the inventory UI is fucking dog shit. You remember how we had our inventory and backpack all in one screen? Well, now there's separate sections of the screen, and the UI for the weapons and equipment slots just don't visually look cohesive. The four diamond-like shapes that where the weapons are passable, but the ones for all the equipment you have to check and see which one uses what equipment, and you only really know what it is until you fill those slots. And now everything is this shitty, cluttered, horizontal style inventory, where in every other game it was this vertical style which looked visually better and cleaner. And your XP bar is no longer that bar that goes across your lower screen, it is now a diamond-shaped ring on the left side of your screen. The whole UI has been simplified in a way to make it look generic and lose that Borderlands look. And to make things worse, they removed the minimap, replace it with a radar, and have the radar off by default when you start the game. I will never understand why developers take away features that are only good and replace them with something worse or just take it out entirely. It boggles my mind. And it makes traversing the open world even more of a nightmare because of what I was talking about before with how visually incoherent the open world is designed. Bring back the old UI, there was literally nothing wrong with it. Visually, it looked clean and coherent. Borderlands 1's was a little buggy, but it still worked well. Meanwhile, 4's is god-awful looking and horrendously buggy. The style of humor in Borderlands has been one of the most iconic things Borderlands has been recognized for besides its art style and gameplay. The humor in Borderlands 1 was sort of dry but had this dark undertone to it. Pretty much something you would get out of a group of people that live somewhere where death can happen just a few steps outside your front door. Then in 2, the humor kinda kicked up a bit. It still kept its dark themes, but sprinkled in maybe a funny sentence, a dark joke, but overall the humor had this sort of lightheartedness despite the fucked up things going on around us. And not in like a, oh, we always try to stay positive sort of way, but more like a, yeah, that bandit ate my son and I fucked his skag type of deal. And then in 3, they went full throttle on the humor, while also the humor completely losing its meaning. Everything had to be a quip or a one-liner, a joke that led to another joke, an unfunny use of toilet humor. it was just horrendous. And now at 4, it feels like it's completely devoid of any humor. Like they were afraid to be funny. I'm not even joking, there are 2 parts in the game I can recount on memory that had a bit of humor in it and made me super disappointed when they fully didn't ride in on one of the jokes. The one was when you cleared out the Electi's base and Callus kills Zane's Thresher. And after the fight is over and when he's grieving over his Thresher, he says, "She wouldn't hurt the fly, except for all the people that she's killed."
My sweet Sophia. He never hurt a fly. Aside from the hundreds of casualties, of course.
And I was like, come on, man, you couldn't have just run with the joke. Why did you have to insert your dogshit millennial humor into that? And the second one that actually made me chuckle was when I was doing stuff to start up Callus's moonshot elevator, and there's a pipe you have to climb or something along the sorts, and Zane says to Amara, "I love laying pipe."
And I'm a certified expert at laying pipe.
Flint.
And that one got me. But other than that, I don't remember at all where the funny was in this game. The Rippers never had their crazy voice lines like the Psychos did in Borderlands 2. Just completely devoid of humor, and I think they scaled back way too much on that. Don't be scared to be funny. Just don't do cringe shit like what you did in 3. Combine a bit of Borderlands 1 and 2 humor, and I think you'll have that healthy balance of funny while also maintaining a serious tone. If you've seen any of my previous Borderlands videos, then you already know that the music of these games is something I value a lot because the music really helps cement the atmosphere the game is trying to deliver. And despite my many dislikes of 3, music was something I think they did well in that game. But here in 4, I have never in my life, besides Halo 4, have heard such a bland selection of music. There is legit only one song I kinda like in this game, and it plays in the area when you're heading towards Splash Zone that sounds like Borderlands 1 music because of the throat singing. Other than that, there is legit not a single song in here that I like. Every once in a while, I will listen to the previous Borderlands game soundtracks, but I'm not going to listen to this one. And as much as I like Jesper, I hate to say that he did not cook for this game's soundtrack. I don't know if Gearbox had creative control over it or if Jesper just really wasn't in his groove, but unfortunately not even he could save the game from its bland soundtrack. Which sucks because Jesper has always made bangers for Borderlands. Borderlands 1, 2, and even 3, he killed it in those games. In fact, I would even go as far as to say Jesper is the reason why Borderlands music is so iconic. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't even recall hearing Moxxi's iconic bar theme. Like, man, you cannot be out here trying to make gaudy material and miss on the music. I hope Gearbox can come back with better music in either DLC or future games. Holy shit, I am not joking, you guys. It took me nearly a month to write out this script alone, let alone however long it's going to take for me to edit this. I'm so sorry this video has taken as long as it has. On top of this video taking so long to write, so many other things have gone on that's kept me busy, and I am definitely in need of a break once this video is done. But at nearly 30 pages of this script, we're almost done. What are my overall thoughts put into a simple sentence? Well, do I think that this game is a masterpiece like what some other big Borderlands content creators have been saying? No. Absolutely not. And look, if that truly is their opinion, then that's perfectly fine. But I am a bit skeptical in how genuine that praise can be, especially since a lot of times they get sponsorships to promote new content. There's nothing wrong with getting paid to advertise for a game you really like, but I do ask that you, as the consumer, be a bit skeptical to such opinions, especially when money is involved. But at the same time though, I don't think the game is bad enough to be called the worst Borderlands game we've ever gotten. It has its problems, but overall it has made quite a bit of improvement since the last one. And again, I cannot hate on improvements. But with that being said though, after 80 hours of playing and getting my character to max level currently, I could not find myself enjoying the game enough to do all this on a new character. Which is a very unfortunate thing because that's what I love so much about Borderlands games. I enjoyed my time playing, but I cannot be asked to play through the whole game again. And with the DLCs coming in the future, it really makes me wonder how much of a time sink just one character is going to be. It really did feel like Gearbox was trying to emulate something like Destiny or some type of MMO with how much of an investment one character can be. And for some people that might be a positive. You paid $70 for a game, so the longer it takes for you to max out your character, that means that was money well spent. But for someone like me who has limited time and doesn't like to invest in one game for too long, I prefer a game serving me content in a balanced way that allows me to explore the game's content while also keeping me interested in it by delivering it in a way that makes me want to try try something new. At the end of the day though, I don't regret my playthrough of Borderlands 4. I do hope upcoming DLCs add really good endgame content, either bring back pearls or introduce a new rarity similar to pearls. Whenever those DLCs come out, I will definitely play them. But for now, I'm just going to enjoy other games with my limited time. If any one of you stayed here till the end, then I cannot thank you enough for sitting here for however long this video has been going on for. As I said, I have spent nearly a month writing this thing alone, and while I have enjoyed working on this, my god do I just want it to be over with. If you've been around here for a while, then you already know how this works. But for those of you who might be new, every time I work on a big video like this, I always like to take a break just to let myself recharge so that way I never feel like doing this becomes a chore. YouTube has been a little hobby of mine that I've stayed consistent with the most, and one I really like doing. I've seen so many content creators burn themselves out by overworking and not allowing for breaks. So if you guys ever see me not upload for a month or two, just know I haven't quit, I'm just recharging. So with all that said, thank you all for watching, and I shall see you when the next video drops.